What's up, everybody? As you can see, one down, two to go. This one's completely assembled and ready to roll. This is what the new Nel Lusso, I don't know how prevalent it's going to be, but promo edition bike looks like. The bill of lading says white. The end of the box says white. But I'm afraid to say, if anything at all, this dude is silver pearl. It's more silver than white, got a lot of metallic in it, but that doesn't affect the way it rides, so I just thought I would share that, because people are going to look in the video and they'll be like, well, you said white, guy, and that's pretty much silver. Anyway, a quick little walk around in case you're thinking about building one yourself. I'm not against the do-it-yourselfers. I just offer bikes that are completely assembled for those who don't want to build one and they just want to ride, buy it, and head off into the sunset, if you will. A while back, I did a little series called DIY, which was, do it yourself. Somebody suggested I should do a newer version. So I'm going to share with everyone the build of this bike. Starting with this video, there'll be 2 more parts to it. That way it's not like a Shogun novel of 3 hours worth of watching a video. And if you're having problems with your bike, you can kind of click to that area and maybe not have to watch the whole video if you don't want to. But I'm going to start from the very unboxing of this bike to the very first test ride. How they operate, how I did the work on this particular bike, the whole 9 yards. So pretty much from box to the street. So if you're thinking about getting into motorized biking, you've been doing a little homework, watching a few videos, feel free to give mine a chance and see if it'll help you with your first build. And if you're going to do a Nel Lusso or a Cranbrook style bicycle, it will 100% help you, because these are pretty much identical bikes. So anyway, I hope you tune in to the next 2 videos of the build. Hope it helps someone out. And I'm going to get started on the next bike. For this build, we are going to be doing the Nel Lusso. This was a promo that they sent me. Instead of black and red, this one is all white. So unboxing this bad fella is going to be a surprise for both of us, because I've never seen one in person that was white. So let's get the staples out of this bad fella. A little hint on removing the staples: instead of grabbing a knife and stabbing yourself or poking a screwdriver under it, it is really super simple with a pair of side cutters to just poke it down in there, grab them, and twist them out. Little to no effort, I may add. And you don't poke yourself with a screwdriver or fight them little guys out. Oh, that one's already ready to go. Doesn't look like this little guy's holding anything much anymore, but we're going to pull him out. All right. Just a friendly little tip. Beats stabbing yourself. Now that our staples are removed all the way down, we can pop the lid open. My personal choice reason for doing this one first is because I'm curious if there's any damage to this bike, because that happened during shipping. So hopefully there's no irreparable damage. So let's pop it open and see. Not cooperating a whole lot on the flexible lid. And there is our bike. I don't know about the rest of the world, but that looks a little more silver metallic than white. But I'm sure it's still a good looking bike. I was just curious on a white. This picture's white and the bill of lading said white. And hopefully I'm not getting colorblind. Okay, well, let me get this unboxed, put the bike in the rack, and we'll get started. Fresh out of the box, this is what you get. Gonna have to cut a little zip ties here and there to get the packing off of it, but this is pretty much it. Okay, now that we got it unpackaged and got it up here on the rack, we could take a look and see exactly what it looks like. It is a good looking bike in person. I don't know if the video is doing it justice or not, but the metallic silver is a nice look. This is how they arrive to you out of the box, as you can see. So we will be responsible for installing the seat post and the seat. Handlebars and gooseneck and whatnot. And our pedals. So just for a general description, I have lubed up the gooseneck and the threads because it does help a little bit, and it doesn't hurt in the future to keep the rust out if you ever have to adjust them or take them out. So now we got our handlebars installed. All right, my trusty stool. The pedals are marked. For your installing enjoyment and comfort. So let's get those dudes installed. When installing our handlebars, take note that on the stem of your gooseneck are lines. I don't know if you can see them real good in the video there, with black and oily and a little shine to them. The suggested level height and maximum level height that they recommend for your gooseneck to be in the forks, because they don't want you just barely getting it in there. That's unsafe and keeping them real tall. You do get a little leeway, but there is a maximum line on there. So just keep an eye out for that so you don't get your handlebars too tall, the stem not in there deep enough, and it might be unsafe that way. Well, it probably will be, so just keep an eye out for that when installing your handlebars. As another friendly FYI, before we completely slide our seat tube all the way down, if you'll notice on the seat tube is the maximum, or I should say minimum, or minimum maximum, who knows, on how far your bike seat should be in. At least at the very minimal wants it in that far. As you can see the lines right there. It doesn't want just a little bit, because your seat could wobble and break off or bend the pole, cause you damage, cause the bike damage, etc. So snug it in there. So keep an eye out for your markings on your seat post when you're installing that, as addition to your gooseneck and when you're installing that. Now it's seat time. I'll have to admit, they send a pretty nice seat with it. That dude is thick. Could be memory foam, but it is super cushy. And you gotta appreciate super cushy when you're out there pounding down the road. Alrighty, this one's not a super hard one, but we'll take you through it anyway. This dude is snugged up just a little bit because it was spinning on me, so I snugged it up. But the seat post with the tapered end goes in the pole, into the seat clamp, not to the pole. What am I saying? If you'll notice, not every bike has it, but this one happens to have one. Has a stop on the top side. One, so you know that's the top. Two, so the seat post through time does not work through and poke you in the butt. Nobody wants that. So we will install that, make sure it's all the way down. If I get the video in there where it's supposed to be so you can see that. And then you will take your wrench and snug your seat clamp. No need to super torque that right now because you'll be adjusting that and your handlebar angle and maybe just a 1/4 inch or so on your height of your gooseneck. But we will do that as we go along with the build. Right now, we just want to get the bicycle together. That is why I haven't stressed to anyone to torque the bolts and nuts that we're working with now, because we're going to do that as we work our way from the front of the bicycle to the back of the bicycle. I personally can't stand job hopping, as I refer to it. Work a little bit back here, then I'll work a little bit up here, then maybe I'll come to here, then I'll come back to here. That is how you forget to tighten things. I personally will start at the very beginning of the bike and nut tighten and bolt tighten and pedal tighten and everything tighten as I work my way to the back. So you're probably wondering why I didn't put the front wheel on when I was assembling the bike. The reason is because that's where we're going to start. No use putting it on to take it right back off. We're going to start there by greasing the wheel bearings. That's important. Your bike's going to go a little faster than you usually would pedaling it. So it's important to have well-lubed wheel bearings. Having said that, we're going to discuss the fender real quick. I just want everyone to know, a little food for thought, a little something to think about. Some people say that the metal fenders that come standard on your bike are too thin and can break off from little brackets and cause you problems. That does make sense. I personally only know of a couple people out of the last 8 years that had any problems with the stock fenders, but I have saw online where people have had issues with them. So I'm just putting that out there. Some people completely remove them, which is okay, doesn't hurt anything, other than a little rainwater maybe splashed up on you, a little extra if you get caught in the rain. But other than that, no harm, no foul by removing them. Some people go with the plastic aftermarket fenders. Like I said, I was just throwing this out there for you, the person building your first bike, so you can make that corporate decision now. Save yourself a little extra work later when you decide to maybe take them off or change them out. Now would be the good time to do that. Our first step is to grease our front wheel bearings. We don't trust that the factory or the store did a correct job. Our wheels are going to turn faster, so we're starting here. I will back the cone nuts up just enough to expose the bearings. Now you have to be careful when you're doing this because they are not caged bearings. So if you open this up too far, a bearing could slip out of the crack, bounce around the floor. Now you have to find it or you're in bad shape because now you got to go get another bearing set. Another way to do this is to completely back all the nuts off and do it on the table, laying down, pull the axle out. And there's nothing wrong with that, but I have ran into in the past that some of the axles, even on new bikes, would have some bad threads or just not cut properly at the factory and strips and when I pull the nut off, so I don't open that can of worms anymore. I just kind of cheat and pack it in there like an old school wheel bearing with a tiny screwdriver, which I will show you right about now. Lucky for me, the race that the bearings ride on is right inside the lip. So I can get away with wiping grease inside the lip, which is the bearing race. So when I tighten it all up, the bearings will get mushed right in the grease. And I don't have to worry about my bearings falling out on the floor by taking it all apart or dropping one. I'm just careful when I back the cones out. To not make it wide enough for a bearing to fall on the floor. All right, I'm going to finish this little tidbit up while you pack your bearings, and then we'll move on. Now that we have both sides packed with grease and our cone nuts snugged back up, now you don't want any drag. You don't want that hard to spin at all. You want a free, smoothing spin. You know you're there when you don't have any play, or you can't shake it back and forth and see it move at all from left to right or up and down. And sometimes it takes a minute. Sometimes you have to tighten it a little bit and you get a little too much, and then just back it off just a little bit to find that sweet spot. But now that I have, these are packed and ready to be put back on the bicycle. Moving right along, off our checklist, the bearings are greased, the wheel is tight, the handlebars are tight, the gooseneck's tight, the forks are tight. So we'll move on down. Now, this has nothing to do with the build of the bike, so I will not be disassembling the cranks to check the grease in those bearings. I will give them a little shot of real axle grease just to make sure, but I always give them a little tug to make sure that the factory at least has them snug where they're supposed to be until they break in. So we're fine there. Our pedals are already tightened up, so those are tight. Don't forget that. Also, tighten up your kickstand bolt. Sometimes they are not from the factory, and it is a major annoyance when it's flopping around and doesn't work. Okay, having said all that, now we're moving to the back wheel. First, we will disassemble our brake arm, take our axle nuts loose, and get our wheel off that bike, because now it's time to install the sprocket, grease the rear bearings, and get that all taken care of. That is step 2. So let's get this brake arm taken loose. And we'll slide it up just a little bit. Okay. Now we're going to take that over and get it prepped to be a motorized bike. Now that we're to the rear wheel, it's a little more intricate than the front, but the same process, or at least the same game plan. We want to glue the bearings, that side and this side, and we got to get our sprocket installed. So my choice of what I use to hold the brake arm is a cheater pipe, or just a regular old piece of pipe. Now I can remove the nut and the brake arm easily. These are important. You have to put these back on. This is what makes your brakes work. I've had guys come through the shop in the past without one and wore out shoes and only a front brake, and that is just way too dangerous to have a front brake only on a motorized bicycle. You're just asking for trouble. Having said that, install our sprocket time. But first, on a coaster brake bike, which is the bike that when you pedal backwards, that's how you apply the brakes. Also has a bigger drum. The free wheel bikes, like 10 speeds, a lot of mountain bikes have a smaller hub because it's freewheel and there's not a brake system in there, so they can make it smaller. So that is the difference of that, just in case you were curious or did not know. Also, this is the dust cover for your bearings. See, your bearings are exposed without your dust cover, and you don't want that. So what I do is machine it. What you will have to do is figure out some way to get rid of that outer lip, the bent lip, to keep that a flat disc. I can't show you how because I don't have anything. Well, I do, but I don't do it that way, so I'm not showing anybody how to do it. You're on your own with that one. A lot of people remove them and leave them. I don't suggest do that because all the water, grease, grime, mud is getting right inside your bearing and really shortens the life of your wheel. Then you're buying a new wheel all the time. And even when you buy a new wheel and you come home and do the same thing, that wheel's not going to last either. So what need be done, as you can see, this hole from the factory does not fit over that. It can't smush against it, because then the wheel hub itself, when you're coasting, will grind into the metal, put a bunch of shavings in your bearing, also shortening the life of your bearing and wheel. So what need be done is this center needs machined out so there is some clearance and I can keep my dust cover. Now, if you live somewhere where there's a machine shop, they may be able to help you with that. Any kind of machine shop, I don't know, depends what garages have, if they might be able to bore the center of that out for you. Somebody with a lathe, a large ream, perhaps. But other than that, that is the next step here on this build, is to resize that hole. Now that we have both sides greased properly, as you can see, we can reinstall our dust cover to keep that grease in there and clean as long as we possibly can. Now is when you'll dig into your vast bag of parts and you'll have to assemble it, but when it's put together, it comes with your rag joint, which is how you install your sprocket, or is one method on how you install your sprocket. You'll put your sprocket, and then you'll take one of the rubbers and put it on here, all the bolts going through there, and then you'll flip it over, and you'll take your other rubber bushing, and it goes on the inside against the spokes just like my fingers, and then you'll put these plates through the holes all the way around and tighten up all 9 of your nuts and bolts. Now, I personally don't use these on my coaster brake bikes because they're hard to line up. So I use a CNC mount that is just for the stock sprocket that comes in your kit. And that is what we'll be installing on this bike. Now, I like these because I can, one, use my sprocket that comes with my kit, being I have a means to machine out the center of it. There is a way around this if you don't have a way to machine that out, or don't have a place anywhere locally to you to have that hole machined out so the dust cap fits. You can purchase a CNC sprocket with an aluminum sprocket instead of the metal one. It is a little bit more money, but they usually come with the big hole already in them, and then you don't have to worry about the machine work part. The downside of the aluminum one is you always have to buy an aluminum one that fits that CNC sprocket anytime you wear one out. And sometimes they get a little costly, depends on where you buy it. But that is just a idea for those who want to get around the machine work and the steel sprocket. You can buy the CNC aluminum one and the aluminum sprocket that goes with it that has the big hole in it already, and then you don't have to fool with it. But myself, I am partial to this here aluminum adapter. I don't have to worry about lining it up. It does that for me. It gives me a little clearance from in to out more if I need some on a particular build, because every bike's a little different. Some are narrower in the back than others, so you'll need that, and it does help out in that department. So I will put these down here, give my bolts just a tidbit of grease, or if you happen to have anti-seize, that works also. That way in the future, your bolts aren't galled inside the aluminum, and they come right out. And hopefully you don't have to take them off for a long period of time. Okay, this little dude pops in as so. This guy goes up here. Get our bolts started. It's just easier with slick fingers to use the hex head adapter to turn it for me. Okay. Well, sure. Couldn't get through that without the greasy finger drop, huh? Now when I put this on, I will just finger tighten them, because I want to keep the gap where they come together right there even as I tighten it, because that is what clamps down on the hub, and I don't want it super tight on one side to where I can't get the other side clamped evenly. So I always do it finger tight until I get my sprocket on there, which is what I'll be doing next. Okay, and as you can see, I have the play in between my dust cap and my sprocket, and it'll all line up when I snug it up. So now I'm going to tighten up these 3 bolts. I've got my 3 mounting bolts tight for my sprocket. Now I'll reinstall our brake arm, washer and nut. As I said before, this is 100% important. Without this, your bike will not stop. You will get one hell of a surprise at the end of your driveway, street, or wherever you take your first test ride without it. So if anybody tells you you can operate it without it safely, they are sadly mistaken. All right. Now, just like your front wheel bearings, make sure that you don't have any wobble left and right or up and down, however you want to check it. It doesn't have drag where you got to really push it. You want it to spin freely, just like it's going down the road. You don't want it binding at all. Another bonus of the aluminum sprocket mount is I have adjustment in and out. So if I need to get my chain just a little bit away from the tire, I can. Or if I need to get my chain just a little bit away from the frame, I can. So we don't tighten this up until we get it mounted on the bicycle and get our engine in place. And then we will check and make sure that our chain is where it needs to be. Then we will tighten up the aluminum hub mount. No use doing it now because we don't know exactly where it needs to be. So let's go get that installed back on the bicycle. And then we shouldn't have to take it loose anymore. That should take care of it. Moving right along. The wheel is reinstalled on the bike. The axle nuts are tight. The brake arm is tight. Wheeling freely like it should. Even give it a little pedal, just cause. And we know our brakes work, so we won't get that surprise at the end of the driveway. I know I've said it in past videos, but the route to go is the aluminum hub mount for either sprocket. Either way you go. If you spend the extra money and get the aluminum sprocket, kudos to you. If you want to go this route, machine out the center of the steel sprocket that comes with the bike and run the aluminum mount, once again, that's the route to go. You don't have to worry about trying to get it lined up and the sprocket turning like an egg or doing this. All that does is aggravate you to death and is the number one reason why your chain will walk off. Yeah, you can get the rag joints to work on coaster brake bikes, but it is a pain in the butt. But as you can see, this one does not wobble from side to side at all. And looking at it from the back, give it another whirl. Straight and true. So you don't have any chain problems in the near future. Because this is one of the main factors of your bike. This wheel takes the most punishment. It does all the pedaling to get you going. It does all the stopping to get you stopped. And it does all the driving to keep you not pedaling. Okay, now we can roll this to the side, figuratively speaking, because now it's time to get the motor prepped before we mount it to the bike.